Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sewing and Scripture. Today, we're going to be sewing a men's Tang jacket. So that's a traditional men's Chinese jacket, usually used as a dress suit jacket. If you are enjoying these videos, please be sure to hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and hit that notification bell. So let's go ahead and begin. As you can see, when I first started, I needed to put some thread on those bobbins. We go through a lot of bobbins. So this jacket's going to be made in pieces. These are the pockets. We go ahead and begin with the outer side of the pocket and the inner lining of the pocket. So as you can see, we're just sewing it on the machine. Personally, I like to hand stitch things with a needle and thread, but machine stitching goes much faster. For this jacket, I am using a black outer layer, and the inner layer is green. So there was our first pocket. Once we have both pockets made for the front of the jacket, we're going to go ahead and attach them. So this is attaching to the first panel on the front of the jacket. We just go all the way around the edges. And then we need to sew the back panels of the jacket together. This way we'll have the entire back completed. So I'm going to run this through 2 times. The first time I'm going to be putting it together, and the second time I use a zigzag stitch to finish off the edges. And this is what it will look like. A little bit of a jacket. There we go. Now this is just the outer shell of the jacket. We will need to do a liner later. Then we need to do what's called an interfacing. But first we're going to do this little piece here. This is the piece that's going to be going between the 2 front panels in the front of the jacket. It's what's going to create that nice sealed look once we add the buttons. So I sewed it up inside out, and then I flipped it, and now I'm sewing the edge to create a nice finished look on the outer edge. And as usual, I ran out of thread on my bobbin, so I had to switch that out. We just trim those tails off on the threads, pull all the pins out, and there we go. Now another piece that we do have to prep before we can attach it to the jacket is the collar. So again, we sew that inside out, and I'm going to go through it 2 times. Once to stitch it shut, and back again with a zigzag to finish that edge. Now I'm flipping it on the right way out. I'm going to pin it because this is a rather slippery material. So despite the fact that I have those edges stitched together, I want to make sure it's not going to slide around on me when I stitch along the outer edge of it. I want to give it that nice, crisp looking pressed edge. And since this is a material that I can't really stick under the heat of an iron without risking damaging it, I'm not going to press any pieces of this material. I'm just going to go ahead and stitch along the edges to create that crisp looking edge. So again, we just pull all those pins out as we go. And it looks like I once again needed to replace that bobbin, because again, this does go through a lot of thread. So we're going to go ahead and continue stitching those outer edges, giving it that nice crisp look. If you're enjoying these videos, again, be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed and ring that notification bell. Now we're going to move on to the inner liner. So this is the green portion. Now this is a satin, which is even more difficult to work with than the black. Much more slippery and a little more finicky. So you have to be careful how you pull it and push it under the machine, or it will pucker and create like more of a well, you won't like the look. How about that? I've decided I'm not going to go ahead and edit any of these, the audio, so you're going to hear me just talking normally. And sometimes you'll just be sitting here in silence as we both watch together as I'm stitching this on the machine. Now, it does look like I'm pulling really hard on that material to get it through the machine. I'm not. I'm just holding it tight so that it doesn't pucker underneath the foot of the machine. And that was the inner liner. Now we have what's called a front facing. That this is actually not going to face out. It's going to be on the inner liner, and it'll be facing on the inside of the jacket where the two fronts close. It's going to give us a nice sturdy closure. We sewed both of those on. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew on that collar. So we want to attach the inner liner and the outer shell together as we are attaching the collar. And it's going to start to look a little bit more like a jacket. So that was the inner liner and that inner facing. And now we're prepping the sleeves. So this is the outer shell of one of the sleeves. And as you can see, they are two pieces. Once we finish this piece, we're going to have to do the inner liner as well. Once again, we go through that 2 times. First time is to sew it shut, and the second time with that zigzag stitch so we can go ahead and get a nice finished edge. Now we're going to go ahead and make the inner liner for that sleeve. And it just goes through nice and smoothly. Again, we don't need to be pulling or causing any kind of undue tension on the material. We're just going to go ahead and let the foot of the machine slide it through. Then we go back through it with that zigzag stitch so that we can give it a finished edge. Now this material, it doesn't have the nice edge on it that you would see with the black material. As you can see, those little frays that are sticking up there. What the zigzag stitch will do with this material is it will prevent it from fraying any further. So there we have our inner liner ready. And we're going to go ahead and give it a bit of a cuff. We're just finishing off those edges real nicely. And then we're going to attach that to the outer layer. So here we are, sewing those last 2 sides together for the outer shell of our garment. And as you can see, I have attached it to the inner liner. I'm going straight from one to the other. We're attaching both of those sleeves. And then I'm going to go back, stick it on zigzag, and again, go across that sleeve. Now this is where we're attaching that collar. So we can have our inner shell and our outer shell connected. This will also attach our collar. So once this is all sewn together, we're going to pull all those pins out, and we'll flip it the right way out so that we can make sure that that collar is sticking up the right way. We do have an Etsy store as well. So if you are enjoying the channel and you would like to support us in other ways, I will leave the link to the Etsy store in the description down below. So this is our collar. Now we are running down the side of the jacket, making sure it's closed. We're attaching that extra piece that we sewed earlier. The one that I was talking about is going to go between the front and the back, or between the two front panels. And then we're going to go along both sides to make sure that those are closed. After this, we'll go ahead and attach our sleeves. So as you can see, we have a lot of pins there. So we're going to go over the other side. And again, we have to go back through this with our zigzag stitch. We want to make sure that we're not going to have anything falling apart once the jacket is completed. And this is attaching our sleeves. Attaching the sleeves is a little bit more difficult because you do have them already fully constructed with an inner and outer layer. So you have to make sure you attach them properly to the inner and outer layer of the jacket. It can get a little bit confusing and a little bit difficult to work with because it does create some tight corners that can make it more difficult. Now we want to make our frog buttons. Again, this is a Chinese Tang Jacket, so we don't use regular buttons. I'm going to use frog buttons. However, the rat tail that I have is a little thinner than I would like it to be. I don't want my frog buttons to be too small. I want them to be a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to use strands of 3 rat tails braided together. So we're just going to unwind it there, make sure all of our strands are equal length, cut them off, and we're going to create ourselves a wider strand to work with so we can have substantial buttons. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tie the end of that in a knot so that they're all together. This is not a permanent knot, it's just there to hold these together so we can get it braided. Come out as far to the end as possible so I'm not wasting any. And then we just braid it. Left over right, or I'm sorry, left over center, right over center, left over center, right over center, just in a standard braid. And we're going to do this the entire length of these rat tails. Next, we're going to tie the frog button knot. We need to have 2 loops, and we're going to overlap them. So it's going to have more like a pretzel. Then I'm going to take the short tail of our rat tail, and I'm going to stick it through the center of that loop. Then I'm going to stick it through the right side of that loop. And then I'll be sticking it through the left loop. So I've gone through all 3 loops. And then what I'm going to do is just pull and manipulate this rat tail until it forms the knot that I want it to be. Now this is going to take a little bit of messing with. It does take some finagling. And as you can see, I have one short side and one long side. I've done that intentionally. When you make a traditional frog button, you do have a long side and a short side, but your long side is usually not quite as long as the one you see here. However, what I'm going to do with the other half of this rat tail is I'm going to use the other side, or our long tail, as the loop side for our buttons. And you'll see what those look like later. So I'm just continuing to pull until I can get it to form more of a big knot. I know you can't really see it too well here because I have my hands in the way, but unfortunately working with small things, it's not the easiest thing to show off when you're on camera. But as you can see, we're getting fewer and fewer loops sticking up there. That means that we're almost where we want it to be. I'm going to pull it tight. And pull tight again, because I want to make sure this knot does not come out. Now once these are completed, you do stitch them as well, just to keep them from coming undone. And pull it again, give it a good tug, make sure it's a good tight knot. And rub my fingers around it and make sure that everything is seated where it should be. And look, there we have our little frog button. Those two tails that you see there on the end, that's what we're going to stitch together. We're going to stitch them together and they're going to look like one. So here we are. I made 5 frog buttons and 5 loops. And this is what it looks like when we have stitched those two tails together. And that one is what the frog button looks like with the loop together. Now we need to mark out on our jacket exactly where those buttons are going to go. I used here just a little bit of white tailor's chalk. And here we are. They're all attached. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons. Our pockets with our liner showing on the outside. That's the same liner we'll see inside the sleeves. And then we have our emerald inside the main liner. So thank you for watching today's video. Again, if you like these videos, please hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and hit that notification bell. Also, I'll be sharing a link to the Etsy store in the description down below. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful and blessed day.